I'm Mindy Peterson, and this is Enhanced Life with Music, where we explore all the ways that music can make our lives better. Mental health struggles have become part of everyday life for so many of us. Anxiety, depression, loneliness, emotional overwhelm, and disconnection are affecting people of all ages and backgrounds. And many of us are searching for approaches to healing that go beyond medication alone. Today's conversation explores groundbreaking research at the intersection of neuroscience, mental health, and music. A recent study out of Yale University showed demonstrated success with music helping to reduce paranoia and hallucinations and ease social isolation in people experiencing psychosis. Even if you've never personally encountered psychosis, what we're talking about today offers profound insight into how music shapes the brain, strengthens human connection, and may hold untapped potential for mental health and healing. Joining me today is the senior author of the study, Dr. Philip Corlett, and the project's music facilitator, Adam Christofferson. Dr. Corlett is an associate professor of psychiatry and psychology at Yale and director of its Belief, Learning, and Memory Lab. Adam is a singer-songwriter and the founder and executive director of Musical Intervention, a Connecticut-based nonprofit and creative studio that uses music making as a tool for mental health recovery, connection, and community transformation. Adam is also the winner of ABC's Claim to Fame Season 3. Welcome to Enhance Life with Music, Phil and Adam.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
The research that we're talking about today is on music's impact on those with psychosis, specifically people with schizophrenia, auditory hallucinations, and paranoia. For those of us who aren't intimately familiar with this topic, can you just explain how this presents in everyday life? How might we recognize that someone around us, whether it's a loved one or just someone that we're passing on the street, may be experiencing these symptoms?
Absolutely. So when we talk about psychosis, I think people sometimes get confused what that word really means. What it means to me and the way that I use it in my work is sort of two main symptoms, really, and they're very profound departures from consensus reality. Delusions, so believing things that other people around you in your culture don't agree with and don't believe, and hallucinations, perceiving things that other people around you don't share. In schizophrenia, that typically manifests most commonly as paranoid delusions or persecutory delusions. These are beliefs that other people out in the world, maybe friends, family members, sometimes strangers, intend to harm us. And with regards to hallucinations in schizophrenia, they're typically auditory verbal hallucinations. So those are voices inside the head commenting on actions and thoughts and speaking to one in one's head.
Okay. And just to clarify for listeners, Phil was the one just talking. He's the Brit. And Adam, since we're this is audio only and not video. Adam, were you about ready to say something?
Yeah. So, my mother has paranoid schizophrenia, and it's something that I've seen my entire life through the eyes. I don't have it myself. And so the way it's always kind of presented to me in different settings is, somebody you are trying to talk to seem occupied in their own mind, and then they might even start saying things about their thoughts, or they might, try to defend what's happening inside of their mind right in front of you while you're trying to communicate something. So
Okay.
it is a very isolating experience that they have because they're not truly part of the conversation. They're very much more occupied with whatever thought or voice they might be hearing, taking them away from an experience that's right there in front of them.
Mm. You two have done incredible work together. How did you two connect? And how did a researcher, professor of psychiatry, become inspired to research music's impact on psychosis?
Yeah, this is not a path that I thought I was going to be on. I'm a lover of music, not particularly talented myself. Had been working at the Connecticut Mental Health Center here in New Haven for the past sort of 10 years or so and been struck every single day coming in and out of the door how poor a job we were doing at helping people who suffer from these symptoms. The medications that we have only work for about 50% of people, and they have terrible side effects.
Only
The
50% of people? I didn't know
the
that.
symptoms that I care about, yes, absolutely. So even despite taking really strong doses of these medications, 50% of people will still have residual voices in their heads or paranoid thoughts or broader delusions.
Oh,
And I got introduced to Adam through a collaborator at the Program for Recovery and Community Health. He'd been doing work at the Connecticut Mental Health Center, making songs with our participants in weekly sessions. And I got invited to come along and just observe one of the sessions. And, I'd been coming in and out of that building for 10 years and seeing many of the same participants and patients and clients not really changing and having really quite profound impairments. And just in the context of this brief session with Adam, they would sort of come to life. They'd be singing along, talking, contributing to the direction of the session. And I was just blown away, just sort of profoundly moving. And it just seemed like something that I'd like to be involved with if I could. And the opportunity arose through this grant that we were introduced to by our colleagues at Perch, the Program for Recovery and Community Health. Adam and I and the broader team spent about 6 months putting together a really great application that brought together how wonderful his intervention was and the things that he was doing, alongside some of the more kind of scientific and objective computational measures that we'd been working on in my lab that could really characterize the mechanisms that underlie hallucinations and delusions. And so it was a meeting of two different ways of thinking about and approaching these symptoms. And I think what we ended up with was something that lifted both of our programs to new heights. I've been able to attract really fantastic graduate students and postdocs to work with me alongside Adam. We've had a really fun time figuring out how to do this work throughout the pandemic and to keep the ball rolling. And most importantly, I think we've really changed our participants' lives. And Adam can tell you much more about that. But
yeah.
for me, just the most important part has been just having a completely different perspective on what it's like for people to have these symptoms and to feel better. I used to think that we needed to find the magic bullet medicine that would just wipe all of this stuff out of their brains. I don't think that exists. I don't know that it will ever exist. And I think finding ways that can help them cope and deal better with what they're experiencing without necessarily getting rid of it completely is a much more fruitful way to approach things. And like I said, being involved in something that's so transformative for people's lives has really helped me feel like I've had some degree of success in my career.
That's quite a testimony for what you're doing, Adam. Anything you want to add to that?
I wish that we met doing karaoke. That would deepen our story. But maybe in another life, for sure, we were a touring band, and it really does feel like a family. He's built an incredible lab that I get to collaborate with, and the people that are in the lab are compassionate people. They're loving people, and it really says a lot about the culture that Phil sets up wherever he goes. He really looks for talented people who have big hearts and great minds. And I'm just like lucky that I came in with my heart. And so the goal of musical intervention is always to see the beauty in people and see the creativity and let that lead forward. And, back to my mother, some of those times when she would be lost within herself, we could play music together, and then she would start kind of improving with me, and then she would start to shake off those voices, and then we would be jamming and having a really great time. And it's something I always knew worked. And,
So
you
you
know,
experienced this starting at age what with your mom with these jam sessions?
it was probably there earlier when just playing like drums and stuff. But once I took the guitar up around 16, 17 years old and started kind of making my music that way and writing songs, sitting around the table and kind of providing, a chord progression and a concept and letting her just express herself,
Yeah.
and then the laughter would ensue. And that's, just a stark transformation from, horrible voices that she would have. I mean, she's very, very lucky to be alive. And I believe, music has a huge part of that in her life.
And she had musical background as well, right?
Kind of. I mean, she likes to say that she was a soprano singer before she had a trach in her throat. But, she comes from a stock. So her brother is the famous Michael Bolton.
Yeah. Another fun
And
family fact for you.
those concerts were really special, and she would be the one. I mean, but she was, like, way cool because, like, in the '60s, she was at Berkeley, and she was studying psychology, hanging out with Frank Zappa and Captain Beefheart, and then she got too sick, and she had to leave California, eventually went out to Iowa City, got her degree, but, she couldn't handle, the torment, and so she tried every possible way to get out of this world. I mean, really, so many attempts at suicide, and thank God none of them were successful, and she's still here today. She comes to our open mic at Musical Intervention. She's a grandmother, and she's a proud grandmother.
Ah. Well, let's talk about the research. Explain to listeners what the research showed. How was music used as an intervention for participants, and what were the results?
Yeah, absolutely. So Adam can tell you much more about the secret ingredients of what goes on during the sessions. But let me just tell you about the really simple design that we came up with. So we brought people to the lab, we interviewed them about their experiences of their symptoms, as well as their experiences of music. We recorded those sessions so that we could analyze them computationally and look at the language use that people put forth during the interviews, as well as head movements and body movements and all of these sort of intricate things that happen that perhaps aren't particularly obvious to the naked eye. And then we gave them a series of just really simple games that had been developed in my lab over the years that were sensitive to the severity of the symptoms that people experience. So when someone's paranoid and they play one of these games, they tend to sort of switch erratically between the choices that they can make. And that we think is related to their expectations that perhaps the world is a unstable and volatile place. Then, having characterized their symptoms and experiences in as much detail as we could, we handed them over to Adam, and Adam worked with them once a week for 4 weeks in a session that lasted about 3 hours, where they would write and record songs together as a group with three other people. So, one participant and three other people who shared their symptoms and experiences. So, groups of four. And then at the end of those sessions, sorry, 5, at the end of those sessions, Adam would hand them back over to us and we would test them again. We'd do the same sort of interview about their symptoms and their experiences of music, and we do parallel versions of the game. So no practice effects here, just new versions that could track the symptom severity and their behavior in the same way. Adam, do you want to say more about the intervention itself?
Sure. It's based off something that I've been doing for 25 years, which is showing up in a room, laying out the beginning of a song, and creating a song and recording it with their voices, all original stuff. And for this study, we had 3 band tracks that we used, and for each week, we would take a band track, create the lyrics, the melody around it, and every group was different, had a different approach, different lyrics, different concepts. And then the 4th group, we would create something from scratch. So we would have no pre-recorded band track. We would just kind of go off the vibe of the room. And by that point, everybody is kind of already established, their roles in the group, their strengths, their willingness to be creative with each other and encourage each other to step out of their comfort zone. And yeah, so after the 4 weeks, everybody gets a copy of their song. I think that what was really special that after each, week, the following week, we would play the song that we did the previous week. And, we edited it to make sure that everything sounds good, everything's, presentable, and that everybody feels really proud of what they've created. And so every time they couldn't believe that they came up with something not only so fast, but so coherent, so just creating hits. I don't know. We're just a hit factory. And so,
Would you
and
have a topic for each song, or the group would just come up with a topic?
yeah, yeah. I lean into certain things, and I'm just able to kind of just pick out where I think we're going, and then release that and allow the group to kind of drive together. And
And you were able
you
to
know,
get participation from everybody in the group. It wasn't just one person monopolizing things.
yeah, I mean that's the hardest part about facilitating somebody who's like incredibly extroverted and
Sure.
wants to take over. I mean, could write 20 songs in an hour.
Uh-huh.
And that's a part of the process of developing empathy and compassion to allow other people to take the wheel, and for some of those ideas that you have to kind of swallow them and wait either for another opportunity or let it go and move on to where we are. A lot of intricate things that are happening socially. But the celebration is always there. It's like it's a messy thing, and sometimes it's like it writes itself, and sometimes you really have to dig in and work out the lyrics and really be diplomatic. But at the end, when it's all said and done, and the final hook is done, and we came up with a cool bridge or something, the celebration is outrageous. I mean,
Mm.
it is like a drug, and it feels euphoric, and you're not alone in the experience. It's something completely shared. And so it was just an incredible honor to meet all of the participants that came in, because, that's like, I understand that society is very challenging, and capitalism is very challenging, and artists are typically a little different, and they don't typically fit into the role of keeping it together, and so they, with drugs or mental health, sometimes they end up in hospitals or jails, and I think of the Van Goghs of the world who had people alongside them that could, provide the platform, provide canvas for the artist. And I just feel lucky enough to be able to work with a lot of these people, and continue to work with them after the study.
Well, one thing I read that really caught my attention, either on your website or in an article, I don't remember, but you said something about really wanting to work with these people both to honor them and bring healing. And I can really hear that come out in what you're saying too, that you don't want to just help bring healing to these people, but you really want to honor them and who they are, which is really, really cool.
Mm.
Tell us some more about the findings of the research. What were the results that you found after doing the sort of the pre-interview, and then there was the musical group songwriting experience, and then what happened next and what results did that show?
Yeah, I mean, the paper that brought you in contact with us is the one that just came out in Psychosis, which is a peer-reviewed journal that's dedicated to psychotic illness, and especially social and psychological perspectives on the illness. What we found, there's a really interesting measure that you can take from people's language use, developed by a colleague from the University of Texas called James Pennebaker. Basically, he counts the different types of words that people use in their writing or their speech. People who tend to use the word I more are more distressed in their everyday lives. So, patterns of sort of personal pronoun use. He found this when he was first analyzing the blogs of people who had been writing online prior to and then following 9/11. Following 9/11, the use of this marker increased sort of precipitously, and he's done lots of studies to validate this as a marker of distress, as have we in our lab.
Mm.
And I suppose the key take-home finding is that people used that pronoun pattern a lot less after the intervention, consistent with the idea that they were much less distressed by their experiences. We also got
That is so fascinating. So I just want to make sure listeners are catching this. So you're comparing first person pronouns, I, me, mine, the
yeah,
prevalence of use of those personal pronouns compared to plural pronouns, we,
that's
us,
right.
ours,
Mhm.
which yeah, I found that so fascinating. Something I
Right.
never would have thought of, and yet it sort of makes sense when you hear it.
Yeah, and one of the things that's perhaps not brought forth quite as much because it's not as much part of the scientific literature, but in the post interviews after they'd gone through this musical experience with Adam and our team, they started to use the word we much more. So it I think maps onto the idea that they feel much more part of a collective. They're not using the royal we, they're saying we as a team and what we did and what we achieved. And I think for many of these people, sadly, that's a very rare experience to feel part of a broader whole and more connected to other people. And I think that's part of the thing that possibly made them feel a lot better, a lot differently about themselves, and perhaps a lot differently about the world too.
Yeah. One thing that's kind of cool about that specific result is it's something that a layperson can understand and become aware of. And just note, if you have family members or loved ones who you think may be struggling with psychosis in some way, just kind of paying attention to how prevalent those first person pronouns are being used compared to plural pronouns would be sort of an interesting thing just to become aware of.
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes difficult to catch with the naked ear, but it's there in all sorts of interesting places. One of my favorite studies that James did that maps perhaps onto what we observed, he analyzed the language use of people during speed dating. And to the extent that they start to use similar patterns of pronouns and start to use the word we, they're
Mhm.
more likely to go on further dates and meet each
Ah,
other later and even still be in a relationship a few months later. So, these patterns of language use that seem sort of subtle and almost undetectable can have really powerful correlates in our lives.
yeah,
Um,
that is really interesting.
it would
There's
be
something there that you think is so subtle and insignificant, but it really is kind of predictive of how connected these people are feeling.
absolutely, and I think for me, that message is so clear, right? To be able to be open to connecting with these folks, providing them opportunities for connection, maybe able to achieve things with their symptoms and experiences that drugs and prior therapies have just not been able to touch.
Yeah,
And I think that's super inspiring. I think it gives me a lot more hope for the future. Not that I'm saying that we should replace anything that we're doing with regular patterns of, or approaches to treatment, but maybe to supplement with this and
sure.
to maybe provide some opportunities to do this sort of thing whilst they're undergoing regular therapies might help them feel better, but also adhere to those therapies better and show up to appointments more frequently and regularly and that sort of thing.
It's
Yeah.
another tool for the toolkit and could have some kind of a symbiotic, complementary type of a result compared
Absolutely.
to just pharmaceuticals alone. So you notice this we shift was one thing that the results of this study showed. What about the paranoia, the hallucinations? Any change in that you noticed?
So we got them to self rate the severity of their paranoia with just sort of a standard rating scale. And those ratings significantly reduced in the post session compared to the pre, as did their ratings of their sort of odd and unusual perceptual experiences, that some of which might be hallucinations, but just sort of visions and hearing things more broadly. Those both improved with the intervention. It's not published in that particular publication, but we just pre-printed a new paper that's now under review where we showed that the game playing also changed in the appropriate direction. So as paranoia improved, people's erratic choice making on the task improved, as did their volatility beliefs about how changeable the game was going to be, and presumably how changeable they think the world might be.
Huh.
So everything moved in the right direction, but critically in concert with one another, right? It wasn't just that people were getting better over time, regardless of what we did. We really did change something about these people's brains and behavior that I just think is really inspiring and exciting and can't wait to do more of it, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, and at risk of stating the obvious, there aren't side effects from these musical sessions. Unlike the antipsychotic drugs, which, as you mentioned, have some negative side effects, like I think lethargy, brain fog, any other common side effects from those drugs?
Exhaustion.
Yeah, they can tend to make you lose pleasure in the things that you typically enjoy, right? So that would be related to the lethargy somewhat. It's
Ah,
sort of hard to be motivated and out in the world. I would be careful to say there are zero side effects because, of course, what we're asking people to do is sometimes somewhat challenging for some people, right? If you find it hard to be around others or to feel emotionally vulnerable, there is a risk that even in the acute sort of early phases of being in the study, you might feel a bit worse. And as Adam alluded to, groups can be quite dynamic, right? There can sometimes be people who are overbearing and take more of the limelight than others, and it's testimony to how good a facilitator Adam is that he can find ways to help everybody work together, and on the whole that was the outcome. But there were a few tears along the way. There were a few arguments and disagreements on the way, but
mm,
I feel like that's just life in general, and dealing with those vicissitudes of life and being around other humans is actually another coping skill that maybe we left people with beyond
totally. Well, and it
beyond
probably contributed to a feeling of connection, ironically. I mean, if you
absolutely.
have some kind of disagreement and you're able to work through it and come out the other side, that is bonding.
Right. I sort of think about my own experience doing karaoke, right? Like, it's something that I do enjoy, but in the few seconds before while I'm standing up there waiting for the track to start and the words to light up, it's kind of horrifying at times. And I feel like many of our participants might have experienced that. I guess I wouldn't want other people to walk into something like this and think everything was going to be easy and perfect. It's really quite a journey. But, the best journeys are transformational.
Sure. How long does this effect last? Is it just while they're going through the songwriting session? Is it a couple hours afterward? Like how long do these improvements last?
I'm going to let Adam tell you about what happened subsequently, but because we didn't gather a great deal of long term follow up data, I sort of regret that, but that's just the way the initial project was structured
Got
and
it.
the funding was made available.
Okay.
Um, we followed up with them typically within a week, but usually within a few days of the last session. We're going to do that differently in future because we think there are longer term changes, and Adam can tell you about those.
Okay. If you've ever struggled with sleep, focus, or even just winding down at the end of the day, you'll want to check out Brain FM. Their tagline is music powered by science. And that's not just marketing. Brain FM uses scientifically designed functional music that's engineered to influence brain activity for focus, relaxation, and sleep, helping you fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, and boost productivity when you're awake. Unlike Spotify or YouTube focused playlists or white noise, Brain FM's music is backed by patented audio technology that increases blood flow to brain regions associated with focus and flow state. There's even a specialized feature to support focus for people with ADHD in a non pharmacological way. Personally, I've been using Brain FM for over a year and absolutely love it. I listen to it every night while I unwind before bed, and it makes a huge difference in getting into a relaxed mode where I'm perfectly prepped to ease into sleep. Focus is less of a challenge for me, but whenever I find myself in the middle of noise I can't control, I just pop in earbuds, turn on Brain FM's focus music, and let the magic happen. Learn more at brain.fm or in episode 203. And try Brain FM for yourself with a free 30-day trial by going to brain.fm/enhance. No credit card required. Links are in the show notes.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking to myself, a lot of the population with severe psychosis have a difficult time maintaining medication, right? And having ideas of like, oh, I'm probably better off without it, and then cycling through an event, a crisis, and then winding up in the hospital again. And so, some of the participants that we had in this study decided to come and be part of the musical intervention community at our studio, at our community studio. And this is a studio that's open to the public. So you have a very diverse gathering of people from Yale students to people on the street, people in recovery of substance abuse. I mean, retirees just looking to jam. And so it's a really mixed bag. And so when I think about being here for 10 years and the people that it's affected, yes, a good percentage of them have serious mental health issues like schizophrenia and have been hospitalized, but have been coming 3 to 4 days a week for 6 years. And some of the participants now that we've gotten from the Sing study have become part of our community here and perform at the open mics every week. We actually have a showcase from a participant from the study coming up where they're going to perform their songs for a live audience, highlighting their music. And so, people showing up and doing what makes them feel better to me is medicine, right? Going to do yoga for some people is medicine, with few side effects as long as you don't overstretch. Um, and we do things very non-clinical and in the studio. It's not There's no sign in. We're not trying to. You don't need a diagnosis to walk in. We're looking at people through the eyes of an artist and a producer. We want to be the producer to the artist. We don't want to be their doctor. We don't want to be, but we also want to be compassionate and we want to follow through with their vision for their future. And if their mental health is getting in the way of it, we want to encourage them to seek out the supports that are out there to continue to be productive at the studio and stay out of the inpatient, ideally.
Well, it sounds like a huge added benefit of the partnership that you two have on this research project is that the container for this music facilitation, it offers a continued longer term community for the participants. They're not just participating in the study and when the study ends, they go on their merry way or maybe not so merry way. But with musical intervention, they have this community that they can continue to be involved with longer term, which is pretty cool.
And diverse, like I said, it's typically in mental health treatment, there's silos. You have the people with addiction in this building, and then you have the people with, schizophrenia, bipolar over in this area. And you miss the idea of, what about mixing it with the regular population? People have something to contribute. It's not just, we don't need to isolate all these people in their
Mhm.
silos,
Yeah.
because what do you get from that? And so everybody wins when you put people together because, people who might not have any idea about mental health come in just to play some guitar. And all of a sudden, this person that maybe they would have been timid around or scared of, they're jamming with on stage. And now they're
Mm.
peers jamming. And now they have something to kind of connect over. And that person is no longer the same. They're no longer going to be looking at people who express themselves differently with maybe fear in their heart or misunderstanding. Now they have some kind of empathy there. So that's the
Mm.
goal.
That's really insightful. Yeah. I know we're running short on time here, but I want to make sure that we talk about something that seems to be a key element in this research, a key element in helping people with psychosis reconnect with reality. It seems
Mhm,
to involve the concept of predictive coding,
mhm.
the brain's ability to anticipate what happens next. Can you explain predictive coding in a way that everyday listeners can understand? What is the brain constantly predicting, and why is that so important in this research?
Let
Yeah.
me take over on that one.
Yeah. You probably could. You've heard me say it so many times now.
You just say it so much sweeter.
So in my work, I think we've been able to show and argue that the reason that we have brains is to make predictions about what's going to come next. And that's because so much information is just incident on us at all times. It's really overwhelming. We're not just passively receiving that information. Our eyes and brain and ears don't work like a video camera. They work much more like a scientist trying to guess about what's going to happen next. And we use those guesses to kind of constrain how we process the information. When we make the guess correctly, we don't really need to focus on that feature as much anymore. We only
Can kind
really
of
need,
fade into the background a little, free up the brain for some other things.
yeah, for the things that are surprising or difficult to understand. And what we've been able to show earlier in my work is that people with schizophrenia, they experience those surprise signals in the brain to things that they really shouldn't. And that makes them attend to and learn about and focus on things in their world and in their minds that other people would tend to ignore. What can you do with that, and why does music help? Well, music is inherently full of predictive structure. It does have surprising elements at times, but it's generally something that we can anticipate, right? So if I hum or sing the line "Sweet Caroline," in the back of your head, you'll be going ba ba ba, right? You just can't help
Uh-huh.
it. And I think because the brain's system for doing this is not compartmentalized into separate things, it's just one overarching model building mechanism, that when you make predictions in one domain, it can impact how you make predictions in other domains. This is why when we hear music in our heads, we can't help but tap along and move along with the music. Now, think about what happens when you bring groups of people together. They start to move in synchrony, right? You must have seen concerts, been to concerts where that happens, right? Crowds of people
Entrainment.
singing
We've talked about
along,
that quite a bit on this podcast.
right? And so I think that's what we've done, right? We've given our participants, who singularly might have a real hard time making accurate predictions about the world and what's coming next, full of surprises and uncertainty and new meaning that they've got to try and figure out. But you give them an environment that's a little bit more structured, particularly via listening to music and performing together. And then they start to move in synchrony with a few other people, including Adam. And then they start to see themselves differently. They're someone who can synchronize with others. They're someone who can contribute to a broader group project. And
So
they can
it's affecting
immediately,
their sense of identity in a positive way.
absolutely, absolutely. And they can immediately get the feedback that, well, I did that, right? Like I wrote those words, and in a very short period of time, I'm singing that song. And over the weeks, they can come back and listen again to this body of work that they've now created alongside these people who are now their colleagues and their collaborators, who just a few weeks before were strangers. And that's all because they've changed how they make predictions about the world, how they make predictions about themselves, and how they make predictions about other people.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I think this project and music in general was designed to interact with this way that we think about how the brain works. And I think our data show that to be the case.
Well, and it's interesting. I think you said in one of the articles I read that music is a safe way of having our expectations violated. And when we think
Absolutely.
about music, I mean, it does, like you said, it does have that structure to it. We have the prediction, but then there's also the surprises and there's emotion involved in
Mhm.
that. Music's been called the sound of emotions. And
Absolutely.
so providing that safe way to have these predictions violated in a way and in a way that you're deeply feeling it too and
Mhm.
experiencing it in sort of like a 3D, 4D type of a way instead
Yep.
of just a very superficial one-sided way, I can imagine would be very effective.
Yeah, Mindy, I like to think about listening to music and making music in a group in the way that we've been doing is somewhat like a roller coaster, right? You get on it, you roll along the tracks. Maybe you drop down a few turns and loop some loops, and you know that you can't fall out, but you're still terrified and delighted when you get to the end of it and you can get off and tell people how cool it was. And I think that's what happened in these
Huh.
groups.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Well, I wanna respect your time, and I know we're about out here out of time. One thing I just wanted to ask is, Phil, you've suggested that music making may permanently alter brain circuitry. Can you just explain a little bit about what kind of neural changes you think or suspect may be happening here?
Sure. I mean, I think everything changes brain circuitry, right? Listening to a podcast, making a podcast permanently changes our brains somewhat. I think music is really good at that because it sits at this really interesting intersection between rewards, broader non rewarding predictions, figuring out how the world works, which is in itself somewhat rewarding. Using your body, right? We use the same circuitry that's for rewards and for predictions for making movements. And so I think it has that sort of sweet combination where it modulates all of the important things that dopamine does, sex and drugs and rock and roll, but in a good way.
Yeah.
Music, right, it occupies so many parts and regions of the brain, and when you add lyrics and memories, I mean, it really brings so many parts of the brain together for this one experience. And that's why in Alzheimer's you see some miracles happen there. So music unifies not only our minds but each other. In my opinion, we wouldn't have come this far as a civilization if we didn't have music to begin to share stories and solidify these stories in so many regions of our brain simply because it had a beat with it and it was syncopated and it had more than just words attached to it. So yeah, you're talking to founder of musical intervention, but
Yeah.
music saved my life, and I know that it does a lot for others.
Mm. Well, as I knew would happen, there are so many more questions I would love to ask you than what we have time for. Before we wrap things up with a coda, is there anything either one of you want to say if you have time for it?
I still have time. Adam, do you have time?
I have a few minutes, yeah.
Yeah, we can answer some more questions. I'd be happy to.
Okay, okay. Let's see here. Okay, Adam, question for you. Do you have sort of a favorite personal success story of a participant that you observed just really be transformed by this experience, whether it was part of the study or something, a similar experience through musical intervention?
There's countless, countless stories. I mean, I just opened up my eyes to look at somebody walking in the room, and I know the backstory. And I mean, at any given moment, when you come to an open mic, and I look at the people on stage and where they've come from, to this stage to perform with each other, it's absolutely astonishing and so sad that other communities don't have this. It's it's shattering to think that here's a place where these people who have been abused in the mental health world, who have been abused at life and just want to express themselves, finally get a chance to do that. And I guess, all right, so I walked myself into it. I think of this one individual who has been in and out of treatment their entire life. I've known them since they were a kid. And music was something that he shared with his mother, and his mother passed away, and he found himself in a psychiatric hospital. And I brought him the guitar, told him, basically showed him how to write songs. I left for about a week and came back, and he was writing songs with other kids on the unit. And I thought, wow, this kid is special. Years later, when he was graduating, he reached out to me on Facebook and said, "Hey, would you come to my graduation ceremony?" I said, "Absolutely, I'd love to." And I went there, and there he was leading a band, and his voice is angelic. When I say he can move an entire room of people. Years later, he and I are the keynote speakers at the European Conference on Mental Health in Lisbon, and where he's sharing his story of recovery. And now that he's a first responder, an entrepreneur, somebody who's dedicated their lives to helping people, even as an EMS driver, being compassionate, and also showing up at open mic and singing his songs that heal and carrying the musical intervention torch just as he was then. And now he's a father of a few children, and it's just a very special thing to be able to do this with people and see the real change.
Wow, I can't imagine how rewarding that must be to see that success in a life that could have ended up so much differently and know that you played a role in that.
Yeah, if I reflect on it, I would crumble like a cookie. And so I just keep pushing forward, believing that this thing actually matters. And the grace just came along to bring Dr. Corlett here, and we are bound by this thing. And I just feel so honored, just to be associated with his research. I mean, he is a rock star in the neuroscience world, and the fact that gravity brought us together, and that we get to sing karaoke together and change lives together, to me is just dreams come true. I mean, it's a full circle. My mom has auditory hallucinations, and we're studying how music impacts people with auditory hallucinations. You
Mm,
can't make that up.
yeah. And not just studying it, but making those people's lives better and
Yeah,
the lives of so many people to come in the future. Okay,
that's
one
right.
last question for you, Phil. From reading your bio, I can tell that you're a little bit of a disruptor.
Try
You'd
to
like to
be.
challenge established ways of doing things. How do you
Absolutely.
respond to skeptics who might dismiss music therapy as soft science?
Well, I think we're doing that, right? I think that's what we're trying to do. It hasn't been easy at times. Sometimes we've been like multiple groups of people divided by a common language, right? We all care about folks with these symptoms, but I care in my own way that's associated with my lab. Adam with his approach, other collaborators who think about things in a completely different way, and some people with lived experience who were on the team who sometimes didn't really like the ways that we were describing their experiences or
Mm,
approaching the study. It's made me doing this work a lot more humble, and a lot more open hearted.
huh.
I think maybe I was somewhat skeptical at the beginning that this could work because I'd come through so much of the sort of biological psychiatry, brain based training. But as you said, I pride myself on doing things as differently as possible and shaking things up. And, I think it's worked somewhat and it continues to work. And as it continues to work, as we keep layering on more and more data, I think we'll turn a lot of people around who are skeptical. I was certainly somewhat skeptical that we could study these things, right? It's almost like anathema, right? Like that's the special sauce. That's the stuff that you can't put numbers to, that you can't do experiments on, that you can't do placebo controlled trials on. But when people tell me I can't do something, that makes me want to do it more. And I think
Let's
that's
go.
I
and
saw a quote once. It was like a Chinese proverb: those who say it can't be done should get out of the way of the people who are getting it done. Or
right.
something to that effect. I'm sure I totally butchered it, but
That's
that's
right.
kind
No,
of
I've
the
heard
idea.
something to that effect before, for sure.
Love
Absolutely.
it.
I mean, this happened to me in graduate school, right? People were like, "You can't study delusions through brain imaging. Like you can't measure them with numbers." And here we are,
Well, I
20
love
years
that you
later.
found a way to do it and to take something that a lot of musicians probably feel is intuitive, whether it's this specific subject or a different related one. A lot of musicians just kind of inherently, intuitively feel that music can be helpful with these things. But it's
Mhm.
people like you who are able to silence the skeptics and win over the skeptics with the hard, cold data and the research to back it up. So, on behalf of all musicians, we thank you.
You-
Well,
Likewise.
I so
Exactly.
appreciate the extra time that you've given me. As you know, I ask all my guests to close out our conversation with a musical ending, a coda, by sharing a musical tool you wish more people knew about. It could be a book or a blog, an app, a therapeutic tool, or anything that enables you to enhance your life with music. I think Adam has a tool that he's going to tell us about today. Adam?
Sure. If you ever get stuck in writer's block, write with someone else. It's the key component. Gets you out of your own way, and you could lean on somebody else's experiences and expression to free yourself up.
So forget the solo writing, find somebody to write with you.
Exactly.
And it probably doesn't even have to be somebody who considers themselves to be a songwriter, huh?
Even better if they're not. Even better.
Thank you so much to Adam and Phil for joining us today and for all they do to enhance lives with music through their research and songwriting and everything else they do. I hope you found this conversation as fascinating and eye-opening as I did. It was incredible to learn how music can complement traditional treatments for psychosis, not only helping reduce symptoms like paranoia and hallucinations, but also retraining the brain's prediction systems in ways that medication alone may not be able to accomplish. I certainly feel a deeper appreciation for the challenges faced by people living with psychosis, whether it's the person with a diagnosis, their loved ones, or people like Adam and Phil who are finding new ways to bring healing and connection to these folks. Also, I'll be paying more attention to the pronoun patterns that I hear around me and that I use. The balance between I, me, mine versus we, us, and ours. It's so intriguing to think that something as simple as these wording choices can offer clues about how connected or disconnected we feel from the people around us. And this conversation is yet another reminder of music's remarkable ability to shape our brain circuitry. Whether you're singing in a choir, playing an instrument, writing songs, or simply sharing music with others around you, you're doing more than making sound. You're strengthening neural pathways, building connections, and helping your brain make sense of the world. As always, you'll find all resources from our conversation in the show notes, as well as a transcript and related episodes you may enjoy, including music as a tool for suicide prevention, fostering mental well being, specifically for creatives, and the personal mental health journey of Maroon 5's founding drummer. All Enhanced Life with Music episodes are evergreen, so check out the back catalog for more ways that music can make your life better. You can always connect with me on email, mindy@mpetersonmusic.com, Facebook, Instagram, X, or LinkedIn. Thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing this show. Until next time, may your life be enhanced with music.